The council chamber of the Galactic Concordat stretched 300 meters in diameter, its crystalline walls refracting the light of 1,000 distant stars. Ambassador Kelvin stood at its center, a solitary human figure surrounded by representatives of 47 species, each more ancient and supposedly more enlightened than his own. "The results are conclusive," announced High Arbiter Zorthon, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence. "Humanity has failed the transcendence evaluation. Your species lacks the necessary evolutionary maturity for full membership in the Concordat." Kelvin's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Around him, the assembled delegates murmured their agreement in a symphony of chirps, clicks, and telepathic resonances that his translator struggled to interpret. "The test was simple," continued the Arbiter, his tone carrying the weight of 10,000 years of civilization. "Place your kind in a scenario of absolute choice. Evolve beyond your violent nature or embrace it. The simulation we provided was perfect, a controlled environment where aggression would lead only to mutual destruction. We observed your people." "Ambassador," interjected Counselor Vexnar, her crystalline form shimmering with what might have been disappointment. "When faced with a hypothetical threat, 73% of your subjects chose to arm themselves. 61% developed weapons capable of planetary destruction. Your species, it seems, cannot help but dance with annihilation." The Kathrani delegate, resembling a floating mass of bioluminescent tendrils, pulsed with agreement. "Our own people faced this test 40,000 years ago. We chose peace. The Vorshan chose unity. Even the warlike Drenkar eventually chose cooperation. But humanity? You chose violence every single time we ran the simulation." Kelvin finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying clearly in the vast chamber. "May I ask a question?" "Speak," Zorthon permitted with a dismissive gesture. "This test of yours, how long did it run?" 500 iterations across multiple timelines and scenarios. We were quite thorough. And in how many of those iterations did humanity survive? There was a pause. The Arbiter's primary eyes narrowed. "That is not the point of the evaluation. Humor me." Zorthon's mandibles clicked with irritation. "All of them. But survival through violence hardly demonstrates—" "All of them," Kelvin repeated, letting the words hang in the air. 500 apocalyptic scenarios, and humanity survived every single one. Tell me, High Arbiter, how many species in this chamber can claim the same?" The murmuring stopped. "The test was about transcendence, not mere survival," Vexnar protested, though her shimmer had dimmed slightly. Kelvin turned to face her directly. "Was it? Or was it about measuring us against your own evolution? You said the Kathrani faced this test 40,000 years ago. Tell me, what happened to the Kathrani who didn't pass?" The bioluminescent delegate dimmed noticeably. "They're gone, aren't they?" Kelvin pressed. "Because when the real threat came, not a simulation but an actual existential crisis, they had forgotten how to fight, how to sacrifice, how to do what was necessary when peace wasn't an option." "You speak of ancient history," Zorthon interjected. "The burning times were survived by species that remembered their teeth and claws," Kelvin finished. "I've read the histories you tried to bury in your archives. The Vorshan, so unified and enlightened, nearly went extinct when the Devourers came because they had eradicated every aggressive instinct from their genome. They survived because the primitive Drenkar fought and bled and died to give them time to remember how to defend themselves." He walked slowly around the chamber's center, making eye contact with as many delegates as possible. "You know what I think? I think humanity terrifies you. Not because we're violent. Half the species in this chamber evolved as predators. We terrify you because we're successfully violent. Because we can build weapons capable of cracking planets and then choose not to use them. Because we can stare into the abyss of our own destructive potential and step back from the edge, not because we've evolved beyond violence, but because we've learned to master it. Preposterous." Vexnar's form flared bright with indignation. "We have transcended, then why do you still maintain the defense fleet?" Kelvin interrupted. 40,000 warships hidden behind your rhetoric of peace. Why do the Vorshan keep genetic templates of their warrior castes in cold storage? Why does every enlightened species in this chamber have contingency plans for existential threats? Silence descended like a hammer. Kelvin's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, forcing every delegate to strain to hear. "You want to know why humanity failed your test? It's because your test was designed by people who survived by forgetting how to fight, then had to relearn it the hard way. You judge us for keeping our weapons sharp because you're ashamed of how close you came to extinction when you dulled yours. He turned back to face Zorthan directly. You said we lack evolutionary maturity. But here's what I know. In every one of your simulations, humanity survived. We didn't transcend our violent nature, we harnessed it. We pointed it at the problem instead of each other. And that's not a failure of evolution, High Arbiter. That's the entire point of it. Kelvin took a step toward the elevated platform where the Arbiter sat. So yes, we failed your test. We chose to arm ourselves, to develop terrible weapons, to maintain our capacity for violence. And you know what else we chose? We chose to survive every single time. His eyes locked with Zorthun's central pair. So I'll ask you again, High Arbiter. If humanity is such a failure, if we're too primitive and violent to join your enlightened concordat... He paused, letting the weight of his next words gather. Then why are you still breathing? The question echoed through the chamber, because they all knew the answer. Knew that beyond the concordat's borders, in the darkness between stars, the Devourers were stirring again. Knew that their defense fleet was a deterrent, not a solution. Knew that when the real test came, not a simulation but a genuine existential threat, they would need someone who hadn't forgotten how to fight. They would need humanity. Zorthan's 6 eyes blinked in that ancient pattern his species used to signal defeat. The Council will reconsider its evaluation. Kelvin nodded once sharply. Take your time, High Arbiter. But when you decide you need us, and you will, remember that humanity doesn't forget. Not our capacity for violence, not our friends, and certainly not those who called us failures. He turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps the only sound in a chamber that held 47 species and 10,000 years of accumulated wisdom. And every single one of them watched him leave, wondering if they had just witnessed humanity's greatest failure or their own.